And somebody kicked a ball into my head. They were trying to cross the ball in. I was in the wrong spot. They didn't make the cross properly and I got knocked out. My head whipped around to one side. And now from there, things weren't the best. I had a head injury. It took a little bit of time before I started going downhill. I didn't really understand what was going on and it took a long time to figure it out. Now, it took me 2 months to then go through a bunch of doctor's appointments before I even considered that I might have cervical instability, and kind of came across cervical instability from looking and searching around on the internet. And that's when I got my first lot of scans done that confirmed I had a loss of cervical curve, which they didn't treat very seriously at all, and I had some jugular vein compression there. And so, as I said, the probably didn't help, and I'd been researching Chong's work for a while. I'd been reading the fascia textbook. I constructed a bunch of the fascia education. The brain fog that I had completely lifted in the 12 weeks. The muscle tightness, the pain, the dizziness, the weird sensations. The list of symptoms for cervical instability is huge because of A, it's impacting the fascia, which we understand, and B, it is in a very significant area. So those symptoms all went away within the 12 weeks, and since then I've continued doing the training because I'm an athlete at heart, so I enjoy feeling better and better and understanding how these, top level pros, how they're actually built internally.
Welcome back to the Gamma Secret broadcast. Today I have an athlete with me that played semi-pro soccer until he suffered cervical instability. Now, as someone who has experienced my own issues with my cervical spine being fused from birth, I was absolutely delighted to make friends with Oliver. We met at the Fascia Congress and he works with Coach Chong Zi, so we ironically kept bumping into each other over and over by the poolside trying to get in some sun in between things. And after talking to him, it was very just heartwarming to find someone that could speak to the issues that I have also suffered, that only a handful of clients that I have had have needed to navigate and move through the frustration of not being able to communicate about this issue in the upper cervical spine and how it affects the entire nervous system. So I was so excited when he said yes to being on this podcast, because I believe we're going to have a conversation that is not common online and speaks to a very intense issue. And if you've been looking for this, I'm excited to have you join us. So thank you, Oliver.
Thank you for having me, Brooke.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I started off playing at a semi-professional level. We'll go from there. And I just come back I'm from a small part of Australia called Tasmania. It's the little island at the bottom. And I just come back from trials in Melbourne, which is a big thing for someone in Tasmania to go up there and do something like this. And then unfortunately, I came back. I had an accident in a game. It was no one's fault. I was just playing the game. I've got a clip of it actually. And somebody kicked a ball into my head. They were trying to cross the ball in. I was in the wrong spot. They didn't make the cross properly and I got knocked out and my head whipped around to one side. And now from there, things weren't the best. I had a head injury, but physically I was pretty okay. It took a couple months, about 2 months, to felt like I was pretty much fully recovered. And then from there, I actually went back to Melbourne. I got selected for the team that I trialed for and was pursuing that as a professional career. It took a little bit of time before I started going downhill, which I'm sure we can talk about throughout this podcast, sort of the non-linear nature of fascial injuries. And so I didn't really understand what was going on, and it took a long time to figure it out and come to the conclusion, which is when I started doing my program with Chong and after trying a bunch of different things.
Okay. Wow, that sounds like such an intense injury. Were you concussed? Did they diagnose you at all with like a concussion from that, or?
Yeah, so I started off with the concussion diagnosis and I felt like I'd recovered very well after about 2 months from that. That was about the end of the season, so I didn't go back and continuing playing that season because it was around about September time. And then I had that time off. I got the call that I had to go to Melbourne and I very quickly packed all my stuff into my car and drove up, went across the boat. And I was playing well and felt like I was doing quite well over there throughout the summertime. And then I started randomly going downhill. I had all these symptoms come on that people with cervical instability would be very familiar with. I had a lot of the neck tightness. I had a lot of brain fog, especially in the mornings. But it was kind of like the frog in boiling water where it kind of just comes on slowly and you're just trying to manage the symptoms, but it gets to a point where it becomes overwhelming. Funnily enough, the red flag for me was actually we'd just come off summer in Australia. So, we have January and February, summer months in the first half of the year, and my libido was zero. I had no libido. I went and got some blood tests done as these other symptoms are coming on, and I had very low testosterone. And now I'm 18. I'm fresh off summer. I've just been running around in the sun for many months, and I'm like, this shouldn't be the case. So that started sort of the mass amounts of doctor's appointments that I went to try and figure out the problem. But really, where things started to hit the fan was when I was playing in another soccer game. Gratefully, I had no other head injuries or knocks or anything, and I just couldn't function. It came to the point where there was too much neck tightness, there was too much brain fog, I had some dizziness, I had all these symptoms coming on, and I had to be taken out of the game. Now, it took me 2 months to then go through a bunch of doctor's appointments before I even considered that I might have cervical instability, and kind of came across cervical instability from looking and searching around on the internet. And once I'd ruled out that I didn't have MS or a brain tumor, that my symptoms were coming from structural damage and what that means with the jugular vein, the vagus nerve, then I had to move back home because I couldn't function. And that's when I got my first lot of scans done that confirmed I had a loss of cervical curve, which they didn't treat very seriously at all. And I had some jugular vein compression there.
Wow. Okay. So when you went and saw all of these doctors, what were they kind of pseudo diagnosing you with?
Well, to begin with, nobody really had any idea what was going on. I was seeing different fascial therapists. I saw acupuncturists, dry needling specialists. I saw guys that had been working on Olympians, and they didn't have any idea what was going on. The doctors that I saw themselves didn't have any idea, and I went to 40 of them before I ended up doing my program with Chong. Now, at the beginning, I was just trying to convince doctors to get me scans. That was a challenge in itself because there's no real path here. And the diagnostic side of things is also very difficult because, again, as we'll talk later in the podcast, it doesn't include the fascia perspective. So they're assuming that if there is a jugular vein compression or some sort of impingement to the vagus nerve, it would be where the bone structure has changed and it's physically pinching. Now, that takes a very serious kyphosis to actually do, because there's a lot of side stories here, but luckily I had a friend at the time whose parents were radiologists, and I talked to them about this. I said, I think I might have cervical instability from my research. Here are the symptoms, here's the cause, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, that can't happen. Like that impingement wouldn't happen unless you have a very messed up neck. So once I'd ruled out that it wasn't MS and that it wasn't a brain tumor and that it was a structural issue, and that's why I was getting all of these symptoms, I'd at that point been researching Chong's work for a little while, and I had been looking at the people documenting their journeys with cervical instability, and I decided that the best course of action was going to be to head home and try and get prolotherapy into my neck.
I want to commend the fact that you've taken sovereignty of your health, that you were doing your own research instead of just trusting what the first, 5 or 10 or 30 doctors would have said. I really just think it's wonderful that you were going through your own process of elimination of what was going on within your body. I think that's very special, and I commend you for doing your own research. I feel like people would call that like a patient advocate. Like as a patient, you're going to advocate for yourself because you have sovereignty over your health. So your process of elimination there is just awesome. Okay, so you talk these radiologists into what you think was going on. And now, as someone that understands that, the skull sits right on top of the spine, and the foramen, like that little hole that our brainstem moves through, is not always symmetrical. Sometimes it's wildly asymmetrical. And so people can have these impingements, subluxations, where the skull sits kind of off of the spine. And what people don't realize is like the vertebrae through the spine are all kind of like in place, kind of locked together until we get to C1 and C2. In C1 and C2, they have a very different joint. At the bottom of the skull, there's like these two little bones. And then these two little bones float inside of, I call them like the wired closets that you like slide the door. So the sliding glass door that you have, how it have to sit inside of a little rack on the ground, a little metal rack, so that you can slide the door back and forward and it stays on it. And then if it jumps the rack, you can still slide it open and closed, but it's kind of like it's a little bit more of a force and there's a little bit more friction on the bottom of the door. That's how I see head trauma. So we have these two little ball joints that sit at the bottom of the skull, and then they move on these two like little plates. I don't know the names of them for skeleton on our C1. And that's what gives us this full rotation look up and down and side to side. But if we get hit in the head, or we have whiplash, or someone punches us, or, you know, we fall and we hit our head on concrete, sometimes one of these little ball joints can jump off of the track. And it creates from the frenum this compression on our nerves, which creates a cascade of interesting and awful things through the body over time. And it's like if your pancreas is working at 80% nerve impulse, you know, not a big deal for the first 6 months, but maybe starts to become a big deal for the next 6 months. And then it kind of progresses. So just to kind of give people a frame of what cervical instability really looks like. So when you've had it for a while, the spine tries to create as much opening. So it starts to kind of change its shape, or it starts to lock in. And you'll notice that tension will build up on one side or another because our brain, it has to stay level inside of the cerebral spinal fluid. So as you were talking about the radiologists and they were saying like, oh, that can't happen, were you able to talk them into getting you imaging?
Yeah, so I had all the imaging done. I had the 2 MRIs, one on the brain and one on the neck. I had the CT scan done, and I had the X-ray done and the ultrasound on the jugular vein. And again, like getting the reports and getting the imaging sent to you in Australia is very difficult because they're like, we're the experts, we know best, you don't need this stuff. So it's all very generic, and it's a very difficult process to go through to get measurements. And throughout my research, I had started looking into the fascia at this point, and at this point in the story, I've just moved back home to look into getting prolotherapy. And I was understanding that the people that had cervical instability, that were trying these different things, they were missing something because they weren't getting better. Their journeys were drawn out and they were having partial recoveries, or they weren't recovering at all. So that's when I went back home. I had to move back home and sort of put on pause my dream of becoming a professional athlete, which is a big thing in itself. And I started to research more in the fascia. Now, luckily, I have a guy who's been my manual therapist, my fascial therapist, for a very, very long time. And he's been one of our family friends as well for a long time. And he trained with Tom Myers. And I'm pretty sure he trained with Robert Schleip as well. So he had a very good understanding of the fascia system, and he does very good manual therapy. So I had a lot of conversations with him, and I actually reached out to the guy who wrote the prolotherapy section in the fascia textbook. That's kind of the gold standard in the CCI treatment. And of course, I just tried the physical therapy, which is based on the muscle, and that didn't help. I also tried the acupuncture, the dry needling. And at the same time, I was still trying to lift weights. Like, I've been lifting weights this entire time. I was quite strong, especially for my size. I'm not a very big person, but I am quite strong for my size. And yet this still was an issue. I'm still getting the neck tightness. The brain fog is now getting worse and worse as I'm trying to research. And so prolotherapy is the next option. So I got in contact with this guy who wrote the passage in the fascia textbook. He recommended me a prolotherapy guy close to where I am. Now, prolotherapy is one of these things. It's a dextrose-based injection, so it's just a sugar. It shouldn't be invasive because the areas that should be injected into shouldn't be dangerous areas. However, of course, that differs based on who you go to. But I actually didn't think prolotherapy was going to help. And I knew this because I had had chronic ankle instability or issues for 6 years prior to this. And I'd had prolotherapy and it didn't fix the issue. And I'm like, okay, the neck is a much more significant and complicated structure than just an ankle. You know, think about all the things, the nerve bundles that are running through the blood vessels. So I'm like, I've got to try it anyway. I don't have an option at the moment. So I went to this guy who was a German doctor, also in the fascia world. So he kind of understood what was going on. He diagnosed me and said, yep, you've had a whiplash injury and you've degenerated into cervical instability. And this is around the time where I'm at my worst. And I was basically like, we need to do something now. Like, we need an intervention. So that was the intervention that I chose. Thankfully, in Australia, prolotherapy is relatively cheap compared to in America. I mean, what I paid for it was nowhere near what it costs in the US, about $1,000 Australian for 6 rounds, 12 weeks of Prolo, and it didn't fix the issue, to cut a long story short. But this doctor that I went to, he was working on cases of people who had cervical instability, who had these whiplash injuries that had degenerated them to a point where they were now seeking out their insurance claims. Maybe it had been a car accident. And he was sitting on these court cases with them and proving to the jury that, hey, these people need their compensation. This is a real issue. Even though structurally you sometimes cannot see from the x-rays, from the MRIs, the damage, because fascia is water-based. It doesn't show up in exact detail. He was saying, no, this is a thing. So he was fighting for these people. So he wrote me a letter and said, basically, for Oliver's work or whatever, which I wasn't really working anymore because I couldn't, whoever I needed to send the letter to, Oliver has cervical instability, has come from this accident, and he's degenerated. Non-linear. I dropped off after somewhat getting better. And so, as I said, the Prolo didn't work, didn't help. And I'd been researching Chong's work for a while. I'd been reading the fascia textbook. I constructed a bunch of the fascia education, which is now what I'm helping Chong put out to try and catch people up and get them to the point where I was before I started Chong's program. And he supported me. He said, yep, I think you should do Chong's program. And I booked the assessment. My family helped me with the funds, and I did it, and it worked. So that's kind of the overview of the story.
That's beautiful. Wow, what an arch. I'm so happy how do you feel now in your neck? Do you feel like 100% recovered?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. I just posted a video on my Instagram, me doing backflips. I've got a trampoline out here in the yard. I can turn my neck fine. I don't have any symptoms when I flip, when I'm laying down. The brain fog that I had completely lifted in the 12 weeks. The muscle tightness, the pain, the dizziness, the weird sensations. The list of symptoms for cervical instability is huge because of A, it's impacting the fascia, which we understand, and B, it is in a very significant area. So those symptoms all went away within the 12 weeks. And since then, I've continued doing the training because I'm an athlete at heart. So I enjoy feeling better and better and understanding how these, top level pros, how they're actually built internally.
Okay, so just to slow it down, if somebody's watching this that has cervical instability, what worked for you was Coach Chongzi's HyperArch program. Am I right?
Yeah, correct. The one-on-one training, which is different to copying the exercises online.
Yes. Okay, that's what I wanted to highlight, is it wasn't like his standard protocol. He probably had you do some things that were a bit different.
Of course, when you have a complex injury or a specific issue, it has to be one-to-one, because thinking that you can just do a couple exercises and resolve an issue, that's kind of like a muscle perspective. Something like HFT, when you get into it and you understand the fascia science, it's like a recipe to change cells, and you're restructuring the cell type.
Yeah, I call our fascia flow the baker's recipe. So I love that. I think that metaphor really works,
That's fantastic.
Yeah. You're one of the few that I have ever heard heal from their injury, which is why I wanted to do this podcast with you, because these people are finding us. And the fact that there is anything that has worked for somebody all the way through is just wonderful. And that's great. That's such a, that right there is just like such a hopeful note.
Yeah. And something I would like to point out too, potentially the audience, if you've got cervical instability, if you're reflecting on this, Chong has had 2 other people go through his program and also get the same result that I have. And I'm happy to announce that there's a 3rd person that's about to finish, and she's had a fantastic result as well. Now, from the people that I've seen that go through this program, and other people even that have tried other things that have healed, they don't like re-engaging with these groups and with this content. And I'm the same. I don't like digging up the past and thinking about how terrible I felt in those moments, because you spend so much time there thinking about how good it's going to be when you get out. When you get out, you don't want to go back into it. So I think it is important to have the conversation, but I hope these people understand that when people do get better, they don't want to go back and sort of re-engage. Especially, there's a lot of criticism that comes with it, but I'm happy to come up here and explain the science and explain why things occurred the way that they did, and explain, as I said, the fascia science. So that's just a bit of food for thought for those people that are watching that do have CCI and are listening to this.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And honestly, I didn't know that I had upper cervical instability until I did a 3D CT. There was just, my C2 through C5 is fused. I had no idea. So like a chiropractor that twists the neck, they could have killed me straight up.
Yeah, and we talked about that too at the Congress, and how some people even get CCI from chiropractic adjustment gone wrong.
Yeah. from the twisting. And so I found my relief through a Blair chiropractor, and Blair is an acronym for how they look at the x-rays. So instead of just taking like a standard x-ray this way and this way, 3D CTs allow them to look at the frenum at the bottom of the skull and then see how it's lining up on top. And then they did something called a toggle 42 adjustment, which is like they call it the hole-in-one adjustment. And it's applied pressure, not with a machine or an activator. And it's not like Nuka where it's like very ever so slightly like light. It's pretty intense. And then you have to post rest for an extended period of time. And I remember when I got my first adjustment, my ears were ringing. I had really bad tinnitus. That was like one of my issues. So I had brain fog, low energy, horrible tinnitus for a couple years, really bad lymph drainage from my head. It was like my face was always swollen. And then digestive problems. So that was where I kind of circulated. But then when you saw my x-rays, you were like, or my 3D CTs, you were like, oh, that doesn't look right. So I found relief through an upper cervical chiropractor that did Blair analysis and a toggle adjustment. And I was very specific with my pre and post care. And they used this mechanism called a thermography machine or a Titron so that we could all see how the nerves were firing through the spine. In my case had like nothing in my intestines was working, which had explained like, so I went to them with like complaints of my digestion and my energy. Lo and behold, I was dealing with all of this other stuff internally. So I'm happy that we both found our way through.
Exactly. That's the important part. If you wouldn't mind, do you want to have a bit of a discussion about fascia in CCI? Because one of the main comments I get is people saying, no, it's just the ligaments. But of course, we were just both at the Fascia Research Congress, and I think the researchers there would have something else to say about that.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to hear you riff on it. Fire away.
Well, yeah, I wanted to say that, you know, we're at the Fascia Research Congress. We are listening to these people present research and sharing their ideas, and you know, there's of course some big names there. Robert Schleip, who, you know, is kind of like I call him like the godfather of the research. He's kind of overseeing everything, and people know his face and they associate him with fascia. But from an anatomical perspective, the ligaments are not on their own. It's not just bone and ligament and tendon. These systems that are connective tissue that fall under the heading of fascia, it is connective tissue and it's holding the body together through tensegrity. When people think of tension, they think like muscle tension, they think of like soreness. This is a good type of tension. And this is, again, where you kind of get deeper into how the fascia system actually functions and that it needs tension. So if it holds the body together through tension, we know this is a fact. It includes the ligaments, so cervical instability, therefore must be a fascia injury. And we understand it's one piece. It's continuous through the whole body. As Brooke understands, the feet and the toes, very, very significant with all injuries. The last thing, which is one of my favorite studies, is there's a guy called Jan Wilk, and I believe he's a German researcher, and he showed that more than 80% of all injuries occur on the fascia and not the muscle. So if you have a injury, cervical instability, whether you have EDS, which is degeneration, that is genetic, or you have a head trauma, a whiplash injury, whatever it may be, you know that if the structure changes, which is being held together by fascia, then you have a fascia injury. So we can't address that with muscular focused remedies, protocols, etc., which is what the current group of people that are in these cervical instability groups, this is what they're doing. This is what the standard things to try is, including surgery. And so it's important to make that, it's important to show, okay, cervical instability is a fascia injury, and what does that actually mean? And then we have to go from there. So including the ligaments in that is very, very important, because I'm not saying by any means that CCI or cervical instability has nothing to do with ligaments. That is not the case. It's all one tensegrity system, and if it gets damaged, the whole body can be impacted.
Another way that I would kind of describe it is like it's unravels. So like our major fascia bands that hold up our head and create like what we call our posture. Like it starts as these bands that come up off of the feet and then they split and divide. And then there's 26 different insertions into the skull. But everything has to pass through the neck area. So there's so much happening in here that if we have a whiplash injury or a bad fall, we have two kind of layers. If the bones get disjointed, right, then you can see that on an x-ray and somebody can repair it. But if you got punched in the face or you got punched and then you fell and you hit a curb, and everything kind of twisted and torqued away. Your bones may be fine, but you may have torn one of the fascia insertions on one side, and it doesn't happen immediately. There's this slow unravel. And that slow unraveling is absolutely terrifying to experience inside of the body, because you can't really locate what the hell happened, but you know kind of when it started. You have this idea of like, okay, there was this kind of blunt injury, and then this slow unraveling happened. And in the allopathic world, they want to cut you open and they want to reattach something to something. And to find a way around that is like a slow and gentle process that you have to kind of recreate that energy. And the energy to me is electrical. So, like, when we can fire the nerves, everything will follow. So, it's when the nerves aren't firing, that's when we start to have serious stagnation in the body, because the electricity is what gives everything cell turnover. It's what pumping the lymph, is what creating the circulation. So, anytime we're dealing with the neck that has so many nerves coming off of it, because everything is fluttering down from our central nervous system through the brainstem, that's where it gets a little sticky and scary. And I'm not kidding you, Oliver. I've seen surgeons like recommend skull surgery where they open the frenum more, just to make more room for like the brainstem to kind of be like pulled down deeper. And it's like, wow, you're going to just open up the hole in the back of your head. Like, you can find a gentler way through. So the standard protocol there, the procedure to fix it isn't like lighthearted. It's like brain surgery kind of in some ways.
Yeah, I was smiling not because it's a funny topic, but because like it just resonates when you talk about non-linear is like my favorite word. Things don't happen in a straight path, and that's why it's important to address before you get bedbound, essentially. And the other part is just hearing the terminology and hearing about the unraveling, the disorganization of the fascia, the loss of tensegrity. That's exactly what's happening. Again, can't be explained by just looking at ligaments and muscles.
Wow. I'm so happy that you found your way through and both of us can kind of sit here and just kind of riff about it, because it was a scary time and it was very confusing. And
Yeah, I'm sure it
you
was.
kind of feel, I don't like the word gaslight, but it actually, you kind of feel gaslit by the doctors that you're trying to explain. They're like, there's nothing wrong with you. Your structure looks fine. It's like,
I
oh,
See, I saw 40 doctors, and Chong, I think, was the 41st person that I went to. I actually didn't have a bad experience of people telling me that it's just in your head. I know a lot of people do, but I just had people saying to me, I don't know what's going on. You need to see the next person, which I think genuinely is a good way of going about things. If somebody didn't know, they would just say, go find another solution. So I
yeah.
never had anyone tell me that it was just in my thoughts, but I know a lot of people do. You were just touching on before about the electrical side of things, which I know you want to discuss in this podcast, as particularly one of the things that I have an interest in, which is, why I'm wearing the red glasses, and that link between the mitochondria and the fascia and electricity, and how that actually impacts how the body heals.
I'm ready. Tell me.
Fantastic. I mean, this is none of what I talk about is my original work. I want people to understand this stuff that I speak about is the fascia researchers, and if you want to look at who that is, you can just buy the fascia textbook, and you'll see the list of people in there. The first one was published in only 2013, so this is one of the reasons why the doctors, they aren't educated on this topic. It's very, very new. The research itself is very new, and it's constantly developing.
Wait, which textbook are you referring to? This one?
Yeah, that one. Yep.
Okay, good. I got them all.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So yeah, for those people that say, oh, I don't want to pay for XYZ, buy the book. Just buy the book. It's an investment. It's very technical wording, but you know that there's no bias. This is just what the researchers found and what's been documented, and the new anatomy, which includes the fascia on top of the muscular skeletal system that your doctors are talking about. And the other half of the stuff that I talk about, of course, is Chong's work and his interpretation of the fascia research, and then his own independent research, which is unique. And I'm happy to announce it's currently undergoing randomized controlled clinical trials. So that should be out sometime in the next couple of months. But, we've gotten to the point now where Chong is able to say, all right, let's do a randomized controlled trial on this. And before I talk about the electricity stuff, I haven't forgotten, but yeah, that should be completed before too long. And there will be a research paper, and then people can see, like, this is the scientific proof of why Chong has been getting the results that he has, not just in one type of injury, but in many different types of injuries, because he's training the fascia and it connects the whole body. So if you use the fascia's properties and behaviors, you should be able to remodel it. And that's what this paper will show.
That's beautiful. All right. So back to the electrical component.
Back to the electrical component. So The other part of the work of which I was studying and connected and made me understand Chong's work more in a unique sort of way is a guy called Dr. Jack Kruse. He's a surgeon and he does a lot of work on light, water, and magnetism. These are like the three stools of health, and you can break everything down into these kind of three components of the physics of the human body. So Dr. Jack Kruse, again, the reason why I'm wearing the blue light blocking glasses. So Jack, I heard on one of his podcasts, I was studying his work very deeply while I was also studying Chong's work and the fascia textbook and everything all in once, because I knew that I had to do something that nobody else was doing and try and pick the missing thing, which has worked out for me. Jack said in one of his podcasts, he's talking about the mitochondria and how they're basically using the environment to create power, to create charge. And I knew I had a fatigue issue because I had very high levels of fatigue. And he was talking about this concept called semiconduction. And to make it very basic, you basically have an input and then you create a charge from that input. Now, fascia is what you call a semiconductor because it is a crystal, because it's got collagen in it, and collagen is made from carbon. And when carbon is compressed, it creates piezoelectricity. So this piezoelectricity is used to rehabilitate and regenerate cells. It's used for repair. Now, I understood from Jack Kruse's work talking about a researcher called Bose, B-O-S-E, like the headphones, but not the headphones. When this Bose scientist was looking at semiconduction, he found out that if there was imperfections in the crystal structure that he was studying, the charge was lower. So I was like, okay, I've got a fatigue issue. I'm sleeping right, I'm eating right, my environmental behaviors are right, but I've got this fatigue issue that seems to be linked with this issue. And then I realized, okay, if the imperfections are in the fascia, my body can't make charge from the exercise that I'm doing and the environment that I'm in. I can't sustain the energy. It's leaking and I can't pass it on. And then I come to find out as well that the fascia is a hydrated structure. It's got water. It's piezoelectric, as we just talked about, and flexoelectric too. And it's passing the charge through the body. So if the mitochondria are struggling to make energy, if you've had a head injury or whatever it may be, and you can't pass the charge through the body like a power grid, the power grid's down because you've got fascia injuries, that's going to make a head injury very bad, and that's going to make your fascia injury not able to recover. You can't put the energy in the cell to heal it. So I was like, okay, part of that is fixing my circadian rhythm and doing all the right protocols, which is very easy to do, and you can basically do it for free. And the other part of that is fixing the structure. And I knew I had a physical issue, damage to the physical structure causing the issues. So I knew that if I fixed that, then other things are just going to fall into place. And that's absolutely what has happened. And in theory, using Chong's training does increase piezoelectricity. It increases the connections in the fascia. And as we understand it, it's forming new connections, creating a new structure, and allowing the electricity to flow through it differently. Another reason why you can harness free energy. These athletes that are performing at the top level, they don't seem to get tired. They have very little body mass, like the marathon runners, but they can go forever. They're not using big muscles. They're not using ATP. They're able to recycle that energy and build that up with the piezoelectricity, and they're also able to heal their bodies as they move. So it's not breaking them down. It's actually building them up. So I was like, I have to get to a point where my body can use this exercise to charge up. And that was just going to be a compounding effect. And it was an exponential effect. So that's how I sort of linked the mitochondria side of stuff that I was interested in with the fascia stuff, and combined it together. And I'm in a very happy place now.
Where does the breath fit in for you?
Where does the breath fit in for me? I know this is one of your big focuses, and I'm gonna go on the counter, and I'm going to say that if your fascia system is disorganized and you have dysfunction, that the regulation side of things will help in the short term, but long term, the structure still has to change to fix the root cause of the problem. So for me, the breath fits into this HRV data of understanding that your nervous system needs to be working properly. You can't be chronically stressed all the time. And so that you're using that while you are making these physical changes to your fascia structure with the training, with the exercise, to allow your body to recover in between the sessions. Now, this is why I mentioned at the start why my libido was low. I wasn't trying to be vulgar. I'm saying that I wasn't psychologically stressed. My body was physiologically stressed because of what was going on, because of what my body was trying to fight. Didn't have the electricity to do, didn't have the power to do. And so then the breath work stuff that I know you're huge on is going to allow people to get into a position where they can actually start to relax and make that physical change.
I want to acknowledge the fact that your vulnerability around your libido is commendable, and that is a symptom of upper cervical instability, and I think a very important one. So the fact that that triggered you to kind of acknowledge things was great.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm open to any questions, and people know that they're going to get an honest response. So I
Yeah.
think that's also important too.
So I really view the fascia and the breath as married systems. So like if somebody does, granted, I love what coach is doing. I'm hanging out in the niche of recovery. Right. So I built my programs for touring athletes and artists. So they're highly efficient and you can take them on the road without a therapist. And the point of my systems is as an athlete or an artist, you experience heavy duty adrenaline. Right. So let's get past recovery. Like, so somebody, is in a decent shape and they know that they have a tournament coming up. And don't get me wrong, I love fascia stuff because body tension is enormous of how our body's going to calibrate and handle new and uncertain things, how it feels grounded. But I actually think there's a whole next level for us to start to experience. And that's the body's outside, the muscles outside of the body. And I believe that the breath rate and the fascia tension are the two physiological inputs that are helping us control our brainwave state, our nervous system state, and our HRV. So, in my little equation, if we train both breath rate and body tension, that's going to give us a lot more control, kind of like a car. Like a car, if you open the hood, there's a lot going on, but when you actually get in the car to drive, you basically have three inputs: the steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the gear shift. So to me, when someone gets flooded with adrenaline, the heart rate increases. That communicates back to the brain that panic has set in, and then the body starts to become tense. And if you're an athlete, any sort of paralysis is going to drop you out of the flow. So, body tension is one way to train it, but breath rate is the way that we control our HRV under pressure. To me, when we train for a clean lung field, clean nasal glands, and then a flexible, elastic lung capacity where we can breathe in a shape, and which I think is like one of the most overlooked parts of most breath work. They just count and expand and collapse, and there's literally no rhyme or reason, and somebody's yelling at you the whole time. Versus we experience our own shape of our body and we learn to play the lungs like an accordion. And as a singer, it's huge because that's how you belt. If you just give away the air in the lower lung field, you don't have any muscles up here to really push. So you lose your power. But if we train to push the air down towards the diaphragm, we can actually maintain like a long, pure note at one pressure system. And, it's great for singers, but when we apply it to the nitric oxide of adrenaline, I think it allows us to tap in. So adrenaline hits us and we have two options: utilize it properly or become, paralyzed or panic and kind of, have to catch up to it. And I want, my clients when they're under pressure to be able to drop their breath rate, pull that tongue into position so their vagus nerve is active, open their toes on the stage that they're in, and let it dump into their body, knowing that they're going to be able to control how they respond and serve. Like if you're a singer, you're serving the audience. If you're an athlete, you're serving, who's there. You're serving your team. So that's the way that I see them is they're a married unit under pressure. And when we're recovering and when we're training, it's a different conversation than when we're walking out on the field. And when we're walking on the field or walking on a stage, there's this extra flow that we get to experience of like how we show up. The presence that we electrify an audience with is, I think, the next level. So like when we zoom in to the top 1% of the world, everybody's got the same equipment. Everybody has the same level of experience, but what separates the best of the best from the not best of the best? And I love looking at Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods. They're the great of the greats, right? And they had these amazing post-tournament rituals of presence where after the game was over, instead of stewing on it, they would create games. So like Michael Jordan was part of a team, so he would play these card games and they would gamble. Tiger Woods would play ping pong against his competitors, and they have like waged wars about these ping pong battles that happen after the tournaments. But I think those like post recovery protocols of controlling our electromagnetism is kind of a worthy conversation to have. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what you said is, it's everyone can see what's happening on the outside, what sort of prep work people are doing, what equipment they have, but what's going on the inside, which you can't see, is what confuses people. Again, the same reason why people look at someone with cervical instability that can stand up and talk or sit down and talk and say there's nothing wrong with you. It's the same reason why a professional athlete can go out on the field and perform well. You don't know how their diaphragm, how their respiratory system's working. You don't know how they're built internally. These are things we can't see. And these are definitely the exciting things to look at and study and have protocols for. And I think that links the two perfectly together. And clearly, the breath and the respiratory system is very, very closely linked with the fascia. And it's one of those things that you can control in real time. So I think you've absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of interested. So like what was the most panicky, or like maybe panic's the wrong word, but like the most intense adrenaline dump that you had as a soccer player?
After I got hit in the head, I don't know. There's moments like maybe my debut for playing semi-professionally. You sit and you're obviously not playing first, you're not starting, so you sit and you wait for like 80 minutes. While the game's going, there's a 15-minute halftime, and you're just sort of waiting to go on the field. And that sort of, for me, would have probably been the biggest adrenaline dump, but it was a bit of the opposite way around. It's like you're preparing, so you're like adrenaline the whole time, and then you go on the field and you're kind of like, damn, like I've run out of energy nearly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's probably the example I'd give.
That's funny. So there's this I've okay, so adrenaline in golf, there's no one else you can rely on, it's just yourself. So you develop like a very intimate relationship with when adrenaline starts to dump in your system because you have to hit that first shot. I always try to tell my clients, it's like, listen, 10 minutes before you step up, that's where we want to buffer that adrenaline. Because if you get too psyched up and your show isn't till 8 p.m., you're going to run out of that overload, that overdrive. Your sympathetics, you're going to trigger too quick. So we develop like little sequences for them to stay in the moment, as bored and as relaxed as possible. And when you train right, you start to get the yawns the day of the event. And when the yawns hit, it's like, cool, now the body's going to start kind of preparing for the onslaught that the adrenaline's going to bring you. And then ideally, the adrenaline hits you 10 minutes before you're jumping in, because then you have a chance to kind of calibrate to your new heart rate. Hold yourself in the moment, do your deep breathing, do your mighty breaths, open your toes up, make sure the body is warm, and then you're good to go. And that to me is like the sweet spot. It's like if you can get the adrenaline dump to hit you 10 minutes before it starts to happen, and then you just follow, the mighty breath, you open the toes up and you keep your heart rate low. So for me, it's you reach for 4 breaths a minute for 4 minutes. And then if you play golf, like you can have another adrenaline dump on 15 because you eagled a hole and you realize like, shit, I'm leading the tournament. Now what? And it's like, now you just stay there. You stay as present as you can and you keep your breath rate low. I just recently got to interview a world champion archer, and he was telling me about the first time he set a world record and how he had slept horribly the night before, and he was taking naps in between sets that they do. And he realized on the fourth one, like, oh shit, I'm doing amazing. This is unbelievable. And he had to start kind of walking through his affirmations. And I think that's kind of overlooked too, is the mindset that you have to keep your brain focused, like the Olympians that have the headphones on, keeping the stimulation as limited as possible on game days or on performance days. That way you can show up full. So I think running out of adrenaline during an event is something very common for a lot of pros to experience, particularly in the beginning of any career,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What are your goals moving forward?
So, as people understand, I do work for Chong now. I don't hide that. It's very public. I'm clearly on his Patreon content. I'm on his YouTube channel, and I'm the one making the reels. So if you're enjoying the reels, that's me. And I never went into doing a program with Chong thinking about working for him. I thought partway through the program, gee, if this works, we need to share this with a lot more people. But I went in very selfishly going, I need to fix myself. and I need to do it in a way that nobody else has tried, and it worked. And then afterwards, I said, look, I've got skills in sort of video editing and this sort of stuff. How about I help you try and get your message out to more people? And we went from there. So I've been working for Chong now for nearly a year and a half, and we've got the Patreon, which is Fascia Education. And the Patreon is a project that I love because we do the weekly members Q&A. They get to ask the questions. We get to address their questions. There's other content in there as well. I think, Brooke, your podcast is in there as well with Chong. And the point of the Patreon, from my lens, is I want people to be able to reconstruct what I learned about the fascia to get me to the point of doing a program with Chong. So how did I understand all these things about fascia to then say, I think Chong can help me? So whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're someone in chronic pain, or whether you're someone that, I don't know, just wants to learn more, I want this to be like a library for people to learn from. Now, for those people specifically that have cervical instability, they obviously are going to have a lot of questions because, things cost money and they have to have a reason to be able to do it. Just the same way I had to pitch the program to Chong, to my grandfather and my father, to have them financially help me and show them the science and show them what I'd done. And I actually pitched Chong as well. I don't think people understand. Chong didn't come to me. I pitched him and I said, hey, I need you to help me. I think you can do this. And here's my experience and here's the science, and here you go. Which is maybe a bit of a cheeky thing to do, but I mean,
I love it, dude.
But yeah, I mean, I have a YouTube channel, which hopefully I'll be able to put this video up on. And I'm trying to construct to people the science and what I learned before I did the program, what I learned now afterwards, and answer people's questions. So I enjoy both the side of working and helping connect Chong with these professional athletes, and I also help educating the people that do have questions and want to learn more. And who knows, my role may change in the future as the company changes and grows, and we'll see where it takes me. But at the moment, I'm enjoying helping get the content out and make a lot of people see the videos and understand that we need to address this fascial anatomy, and that there are 22 kilos of fascia that are missing from the anatomy that the mainstream use. This is the reason why they just say lifting weights is the answer to everything. And this is the reason why there's holes in people being able to be diagnosed with different conditions or be treated by these conditions.
Well, Oliver, I mean, you and I can both attest to what training for pro athletics is pretty much a broken system. I mean, they're still using very, very outdated recovery protocols, as well as they're setting us up for early onset arthritis. I mean, what I did as a D1 collegiate athlete and how the PT, I mean, here's the top line of the top line. And now knowing what I know, it's so outdated. We haven't evolved. So there's programs all over the world in the athletic world. And I think it's all kind of held back because the IFAA has not acknowledged fascia with a proper definition. So it's held back from the medical textbooks. So even the brand new graduates, the PhDs and the doctors, they're not informed about the science that has happened in the last 7 years. And so I'm so happy that you're excited about the education, because I feel like that's where all of our minds are best of use for the ripple effect of science, is staying in the education, research, and experimentation field. Do you feel like your time with pro athletics is done?
That's a tricky question. I've had my head injury, which has fallen into this cervical instability story, and I want to be at a point soon where I'm able to train at a semi-professional level and say I've made it back. And
Okay.
so that's a goal of mine, but the brain is something and the eyes are something that are very, very important for all of health. And
Yeah.
so I'm at a point now where I'm very happy I can, ride mountain bikes, jump on the trampoline, and do everything that I was able to do before. The thing that I'm preventing is having another hit to the head.
Yes.
And so that's my answer now. We'll leave that one open-ended. But yeah, we'll see.
You know, Oliver, when I learned about my upper cervical spine and when it was naturally fused, I remember feeling handicapped by the universe. Like, oh shit, this means like I shouldn't be skiing on anything more than a cool blue. This means that I should probably keep my back tucks to being spotted or on an air track. And it felt like, wow, maybe I should just play golf and stay on 2 feet instead of really trying to push these other very dangerous sports, because it made me, I should say, like humbled to my own ability to die. you know, and sometimes that's the universe pushing us down the path that we need to go versus the one that we would have chosen for ourselves, which I thought I was going to be traveling the world as a golfer, but the universe had different directions for me. So I hope that you just continue to listen to the whispers and let your joy guide you. It's very cool that you're working with Coach Chong. Me and Daniel were both just so impressed by your energy, and it was hilarious to see only basically the two of us and one other person up there getting sunshine, taking in the mitochondria after being in those freezing hotel rooms.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Final question. What is the book if somebody was interested in this but didn't really know about it? I know that you mentioned the Functional Atlas of the Human Fascial System, but is there any other book that you would recommend for people who are interested to get into this frame of mind of the body heals itself that you would
Yeah, so
suggest?
so Chong's Patreon is supposed to serve as a book, as a library essentially. And so that's why it's priced so that anyone can join. Like if you drink a coffee once a week, you have able to sort of access this and then see the studies that Chong's talking about and then go do your research from there. Sometimes you just need a starting point. The other book that I would recommend is, I think it's The Tensional Network of the Human Body by Dr. Robert Schleip, Carlos Stecco, etc., etc. You probably have that one there behind you. And that's the one that I read. That's the one that I read. But anything by Carlos Stecco, Robert Schleip, even Tom Myers, to understand that, these fascia connections and lines are going through your whole body, and your neck is not just from here to here. Your neck continues. It's a continuum. And so again, like this is important for people to know, hang on, how can I train the hands and the feet to remodel my fascia? Well, you go through the different properties and behaviors, myofibroblasts, which are very important, the piezoelectricity, which we talked about, and the viscoelasticity, the ability for fascia to actually remodel and change structure. And the other thing that I want to talk about as well, of course, we spoke on the water and mechanical tension. That's what I was going to say. Mechanical tension in the hands and the feet, kicking off these processes and creating a new structure and creating new change for the bread baker's recipe. If I butchered that, I'm sorry, but the bread recipe.
I love that. I wish I had somebody like you on my team, Oliver.
Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I think Daniel and I, since we met you, we were like, wait, what is it going to take to get us an Oliver?
Hopefully not a bunch of injuries. Hopefully someone can learn without getting hurt and do it sort of the easy way.
Yeah, your passion and your insight into Coach Chong's work, though, is beautiful, and I really love what he's doing, and I love that he's focused on the EMGs. I really think that he's forward pressing in such a beautiful way, and I think our work kind of pairs together really nicely. So it's funny, we're in the same niche, but I feel so supportive of him and what he's doing and where he's keeping his focus. I really think that he's focused on the sovereignty that people can create within themselves as well. And him and I both kind of high five about the fact that we're both ground up. We really see the kinetic chain from the ground up differently than most.
Absolutely. And you even spoke about that at the research congress, I heard. So, in those discussion groups, getting people to understand the feet are important.
Yeah, I don't think I'll forget that sports therapist being like, oh, well, the feet aren't important. It's like, hey, bro, that's funny. I asked this question to everybody, so I need to ask it to you. If you were given unlimited research budget to do any kind of research or build whatever kind of center, no limitations, if you were all of a sudden delivered as much money as possible, what would you do with it?
You put me on the spot. I do like questions like this, though. What would I do with the money? I'm going to try and be selfless and have it help and benefit a lot of different people. Chong is doing clinical trials, which we talked about. I would like to have a clinical trial, which hopefully will happen in the future, for every injury and every different metric that people want to measure, and look at the fascia look at this research through the fascia lens from the changing the structure perspective and Chong's work on the foot to glute connection and the hyperarch mechanism, and look at every injury and see an alternative way that it can be potentially resolved. I mean, there's case studies, but people like to have the paper, the research paper. So my unlimited budget would go towards understanding his protocol on a deeper level. And potentially this might be happening continuously in the future. And for those people that do want to criticize, because there are people out there and I'm aware of them, wait for the paper to come out and we'll see if HFT can make changes to chronic ankle instability patients, and then we can go from there.
You're awesome, Oliver. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Is there anything else? Actually, could you tell us where people could find you, watch your YouTube channel, and follow your journey outside of Coach Chong's?
Yeah, so I'm at Oliver Jack James on Instagram. I believe my YouTube is the same, where there's some longer form content. You can message me on Instagram. I don't post about CCI on there. I just like to post like my training and what I'm getting up to, just to show people like life after recovering. It's more uplifting that way. And then the YouTube is, as I said, Oliver Jack James. And if you type that in and type cervical instability, you'll see my longer format speaking like this. Chong is at Secret of Athleticism on Instagram. And yeah, go check out that. And I also want to say to those people that do have CCI, look at Brooke's work. Brooke has obviously put together a ton of different things and resources to do with the fascia, and research her work as well. I mean, there's different people out here showing you what is going on behind the scenes that the mainstream won't teach you about. So go check out Brooke's work. I know Brooke and Chong have a great relationship, and we just want to encourage way more fascia research and awareness. Yeah, Brooke has a very good understanding on the foundations of the body, the connections within the body, and how to optimize the fascia system as well. So everyone go check out Brooke.
You're so classy.
Thank you.